Johnson, welcome to the stream. Hope everyone is doing well. Just clickety-clacking. Clickety-clacking. Good morning, Postmatic. Hope you're doing well. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Good morning, Kandaria. Hope you're doing well. All right, I think that is all the clickety-clacking for the day. Well, not for the day, for the moment. All right. Yes, we got an echo. 2 Postmatics, 2 Kandarias. Okay, so today is going to be similar to yesterday. We are going to do that. That is the plan, to try and do that. But again, it's always up to how good the voice holds out today. Good morning, Samantha and Anthony. Hope you're both doing well. Okay, I think that's it. So within this week, we should be able to finish up Billy Bob. And then, get a week ahead and everything so that I can get sick again. Sounds like a plan. Good morning, Shadow. Hope you're doing well. 30C. Very nice. Very, very nice. Nice and cozy temperature, that. Good morning, Lord Wolfix. Hope you're doing well. So, a complaint about Portugal, for me, personally, is that it's a bit cold. I'm used to temperatures quite high from South Africa. So, I mean, what is the average temperature? It always just feels a little too cold, and then working in the basement makes it feel even colder. What month are we in? Okay. The average temperature in May is 21 degrees Celsius. That's like 8 degrees less than what I'm used to. Maybe even 10 degrees less than what I'm used to. My problem is, I mean, you get used to the weather, so... I grew up in South Africa, not even in a particularly hot part of South Africa.
Don't look behind you. Someone's following.
Oh, someone's following me. Thank you very much for the follow. It is very much appreciated. Flail Gull. Yeah, no, 38, anything over 35 is a bit extreme. 38 is hot. 40s, that's a different kettle of fish. When the wife and I, we went on a trip to Botswana for a couple months, and they had a 3-month heat wave where it was always between 38 and 46, 47 degrees. At those temperatures, it's just drained is the only thing I can say. Let's move the microphone a little bit closer. Well, we're pretty close to the ocean here, so humidity is quite high. But the problem is the basement, or the house is freezing compared to the outside. Even my wife says it's freezing. And then the basement is even colder than upstairs. Well, I call it basement, but I don't know. It is a basement, but it isn't. There's so when you park your car, it's under the house. It's not a true basement. But yes. Under house garage basement thing. But the temperature in here is definitely way low compared to upstairs or outside. Yeah, I've seen that in South Africa, but only in like heat waves. Also, South Africa goes weeks, if not months, without water. Depending on where in South Africa you are. But here, it rains every other day. It's very weird. The other thing it's taking so much getting used to. Oof, excuse me. The sun rises at 5, I think. Sun up. Portugal. I'm normally asleep, so I don't really know particularly the exact time. Okay, so the sun came up at 6:12 today in the morning. And the sun will go down at 9 o'clock at night. That's 13 hours of sun. Is that right? No, sorry, that's 14 hours of sun. So, 9 o'clock at night, you're staring outside, and it's sunset. It's very weird. Very, very weird, I tell you. And then apparently at peak, it's like 15, 16 hours of sun. South Africa, it's pretty much like 5 or 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. or thereabouts. It might move like an hour one way or the other, but it's neither here nor there. The reason why it's got the highest sun per day is because there's very often no clouds. Although Botswana is also pretty sunny, like ridiculously sunny. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. I think we can start getting some work done. Doing 2 chapters of Human from a Dungeon. $53. Okay. So it's a different character. That's why it doesn't flow. Southern part of this America would be just above the equator. Maybe. Let me have a look-see. Simplified map. Yeah, just above the equator. Well, not just above. Probably above the 15-degree mark. The equator runs through about there. So yeah. It makes sense. You're at the southern part of the United States. You're at the very northern part of Africa. Good morning, Peanut. Hope you're doing well. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest narration of the web series, The Human. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest narration of the web series, The Human from a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 53. Horth, Adventurer Level NA. Bone Fay King, Deep Wild Forest. I watched with anticipation as the dust from our attacks began to clear. A convenient gust of wind helped speed things along, and soon Basanoth and I were able to meet each other's eyes. Spears of bone and blood impaled the ground around us. We simultaneously slouched as we realized that we had once again remained unscathed by each other's attacks. Bah! Basanoth said, waving her hand dismissively. I'm willing to call it a draw if you are. We can drain each other's magic and come no closer to a final decision. You're most likely correct, I admitted. Fine, a draw it is. Again. I suppose we'll both take part in the hearing? Thank the High Ones! A shrill voice shouted from beneath the toppled tree. A little help, please! Basanoth and I shared a look of exasperation. The both... The both... The both of us had warned the King of Bone Fairies against spectating our battle. I walked over to the tree and lifted it, allowing Hull to escape its crushing embrace. It wasted no time taking to the air and hovered a few inches from my face. "Why must your battles be so destructive?" Hull demanded, gesturing to the new clearing that had formed within the forest. "Can't you play stone, leather, dagger instead?" "Even if we did, we would always select the same option," I explained. "Consider this a demonstration of our frustration, venting, as it were." "Surely there are less destructive ways to vent your frustrations built up from your impotent rivalry. Perhaps I'll obtain a coin from Moral. Perhaps I'll obtain a coin from Mortal, and you can use that instead." "We've tried games of chance, Hull," Basanath said. "Dice will land cocked with Dice will land cocked, and coins will land upon their sides. The high ones have decided that we ought to be equally matched, and they seem to take some sadistic satisfaction in forcing the impossible to happen and making certain that we remain that way. The forest will heal, Hull, and I've heard enough. The forest will heal, Hull, and I've heard enough chatter," I interrupted. Let us be off, Basanath. Let us be off, Basanath. I detest tardiness and wish to set an example for our peers." "Right, let's go. I wish to see the mortals that made an Archfey," Hull grinned. "No. You lost your fight against Yilf," Basanath pointed out. "You do not have the right to attend the hearing." "I'm not going to attend. I'm just going to watch. I heard that one of the mortals is strange. Neither elf, nor orc, nor dwarf, nor, any other races. It's got flat ears. As if we want to listen to you prattle on for an entire journey. Travel separately, if you must watch the hearing." "I don't want to travel alone. Come on, I'll be quiet, please." "Be quiet?" I asked, my jawbone contorting to form a grin. "Is such a feat even possible for a tooth fairy?" "How dare you?" Hull demanded, puffing up in anger. "I expect such slurs from Bloodfey, even other fairies. But you, I'll have you know that I collect much more than just teeth, finger bones, feet bones, even the little bones in the ears." "Oh," my grin widened. "And exactly how many of these bones do you currently have in your collection?" Hull's eyes narrowed. "Good morning, Georgie. Hope you're doing well." I wanted to change something. No idea. Liquid. Hydration. Ooh, excuse me. Didn't mean to make that sound into the microphone. Yes, scratching leg, headbutt, microphone. Seems about right. So I've got the most annoying mouth ulcer at the moment. Just give me a second. It's on the inside of my lip, but it's right in the middle here. Actually, it rubs against my teeth when I talk. Very, very fun. I would highly recommend. 5 stars out of 5 stars for annoyance. Hal's eyes narrowed at me, and Basanath began to laugh. It is common knowledge that the King of Bone Fairies prefers bargaining to violence, and teeth are the only bones that mortals are somewhat willing to part with, especially the temporary teeth of the young. I began to walk, and Hull hurried after me indignantly, muttering obscenities under his breath. Basanoth and I made our way towards the tree of life as Hull began ranting about the unfairness of my question. Whenever the raving began to die down, one of us would laugh, and would cause it to begin anew. The distance was vast, though, and eventually Hull forgot about my insult. So, why are you two... why are you two so evenly... So, why are the two of you evenly matched to begin with? Hull asked. It seems like a fairly arbitrary thing for the High Ones to desire, let alone enforce. It is because I am the embodiment of life, and Hoth is the embodiment of death, Basanoth explained. We are destined to rage against each other, yet neither can claim victory over the other. Not while we actually exist, at any rate. That doesn't make sense. If a living being became immortal, they'd be immune to death, right? So life would continue to exist, wouldn't it? Wrong, I answered with a chattering chuckle. There is no such thing as true immortality amongst the living. Even if there were, the very act of becoming immortal wrenches them from the chains of life, and one cannot call such a thing... And one... Good morning, Lady Blackwood. Hope you're doing well. And one cannot call such a being living. Even if that weren't the case, death would still have the last laugh at their expense. The very world upon which we tread will one day die, and where will they be then? They will be left desperately praying for death to whomever will listen. They will be left desperately praying for death to whomever will listen, Basanoth said. Mortals are such fleeting things, and their longing for immortality only serves to prove this. If they were allowed to mature for a few thousand years, they would realize that such a folly of desire. They would realize the folly of such desires. Do you think we'll want to die one day? Because of this conversation, I really do. I clicked my teeth in laughter. Oh, come on. Seriously, though. We're immortal, aren't we? No, we aren't, I answered. We are able to perish. Well, it is true that the cycle of fairness allows us to retake physical form. If that happens, we lose who we are in the process. Death is not simply a loss of one's body. It is a loss of being. The King of Bone Fairies contemplated silently while the King of Blood Fae studied me with pursed lips as we walked. I met their gaze and tilted my skull in a silent query. Are you going to get dressed? Are you going... Music's quite loud today. Are you going to get dressed? Basanoth asked. You look like a naked lich. I looked down and realized I had not yet applied flesh to my form. With a sigh, I began the process of covering my wonderful skeleton with mediocre and completely cosmetic meat. Nearly all beings find my true physical appearance threatening or otherwise disturbing. Long ago, a mortal pointed out to me that this must make me lonely. I wholeheartedly agreed and replied that was the point. I prefer solitude. Once the bloodless tissue had bonded and tightened to my Once the bloodless tissue had bonded and tightened to my precious bones, I looked back at Basanoth. Is this adequate? I asked. For going to an Going for the androgynous look, Basanoth replied, pointing at my chest. I looked down again and noticed that it looked as if I had a singular feminine breast. I sighed again, summoning a small bone spear, then stabbing the inflated skin. It hissed as the air left it and reformed in a more masculine manner. That looks good, Hull said. Still needs actual clothes, though. It's never enough for you fleshy ones, I complained. First, you cover your bones with meat, then you cover your meat with cloth, and sometimes you even cover the cloth with metal. Where does it end? At the armor, Basanoth laughed. I scoffed as I donned my coverings. The cloth was a simple tunic and pants made of various plants suited for the purpose, and the armor was similar in shape to Basanath's, but made of bone instead of industrial. But made of bone instead of indurated. Indurated? The fuck does that mean? Word of the day, chat. Indurated. We think this is a real word? Hardened.
Indurated.
Indurated it is. But made of bone. But made of bone instead of indurated blood. Once I was fully dressed, I made an exaggerated gesture to my outfit. Both of the other kings nodded their approval, and we continued on our track. Good morning, Yamashisha. Hope you're doing well. Before long, we came upon the clearing of life, and to my surprise, we weren't the first to arrive. Algebron and Tartars had managed to find and bring the mortals, and a lot of them were sitting patiently. Yulf was also already seated, casually watching our approach. I detected Timothy's presence, but they were hiding in some foliage at the edge of the clearing. I gestured at the king of the sprites, and Hull took my meaning and joined them. Basanoth and I made for our seats, but Algernon stopped us with a raised hand. He nodded at the mortals, 2 orcs and the much-discussed human, and they rose. The human looked exactly like an archfey had described him, but slightly more road-worn. That's not good to hear, Yamashisha. I hope whatever it is resolves itself. Horth, king of the Bone Fae, and Basanoth, king of the Blood Fae, Algernon said, then gestured to the mortals. May I introduce you? You do. The human looked exactly like an Horth, king of the Blood Fae, and Basanoth, king of the Blood Fae. Horth, king of the Bone Fae, and Basanoth, king of the Blood Fae, Algernon said, then gestured to the mortals. May I introduce Yook, Nash, and Nick of Clan Alta? Basanoth and I shared a glance, surprised with the fame of the familial name. Clan Alta, huh? Basanoth asked. I'm fairly certain that I owe one of your ancestors some comeuppance. A member of Clan Alta, an orc about your size and shape, challenged me to a duel about 50 years back. They used a bit of trickery to secure the win, and as their prize they took my, I suppressed a laugh as I noticed what had given Basanoth pause. The king of Bloodfey was staring at the belt of the orc known as Nash, upon which rested a serrated battle axe. I recognized it immediately. My axe, Bathanos finished their sentence. Pray tell, Nash of Clan Alta, how did you come upon ownership of the Bone Biter? The orc's eyes widened as he instinctively reached for the axe. Instead of drawing it, which would have been a fatal mistake, he ran his hand over it. My boy from the Adventurers Guild, he explained. My father owned one that was almost just like it. Basanoth and I looked closer at the axe. It was very similar, but contained much more iron than Bone Biter could have. Even though the extra iron makes it a more effective weapon against me, Basanoth would be unable to safely wield it. We exchanged a look. I see, Basanoth laughed. A near-perfect replica. Does your father still have the original? I'll gladly face him again for the chance to regain it. Though, he's likely getting on in years, so perhaps we should do Battle of Wits instead. Well, my apologies. My apologies, Nash bowed his head slightly. My father is long dead, and he was buried with the axe. It was his most cherished weapon. I see. You have my condolences. It fills me with bittersweet happiness to know that he enjoyed my axe so much. Basanoth had it made specifically to give them an edge against me, I explained. Then he immediately lost it to your father. That's true. I retrieved the weapon and ran into your father on my way to the challenge. I retrieved the weapon and ran into your father on my way to the challenge. I retrieved the weapon and ran into your father on my way to Challenge Hall. I was unaware that your father had been living wild, as he put it, and agreed to face him for the axe. If I had won, I would have gained his blood, but I fell into one of the traps he had set to catch food for the night. As a result, he took the victory and my axe, Masternath sighed. And to top it off, the smith that crafted it was hit by a falling star before I could ask them to make another. They were reborn, of course, but lost all memory of how to fashion metals. Divine intervention, I nodded. That's what you get for trying to surpass me. The mortal's eyes widened in horror at our little exchange, except for the sorcerer named York. His eyes remained calm and collected, as if he wasn't the least bit surprised to hear anything that was being said. I found this curious, but before I could ask him anything, Basanoth turned to the human. So, Nick, you must be the one that made a couple of new Archfey. Yes, but not on purpose, Nick stammered nervously. How exactly does one make How exactly does one make accidentally two Archfey? I asked, bemused. Well, they stopped us in the road because they wanted our names. But since we need our names, I gave them new names, and then they were Archfey. That's quite a lot of power to create a name for a Fey, Basanoth said. However, that isn't enough to make an Archfey. It shouldn't be, at least, I added. Though we're not exactly experts on the matter. Mamuldebrand would know more. Just where is the king of the Archfey? Having a conniption, Tartars said jovially. They'll be joining us shortly. A conniption? What for? A bunch of things, really. First, the fact that we were made into Archfey under mysterious circumstances. Then my name and the fact that I chose it. Finally, some sort of sprites killed his favorite tea tree as a prank. I instinctively glanced towards Timothy, who winced and shrank back further into the foliage. Hull was resting upon the sprite's shoulders and had to fight a branch to remain there. Basanoth let out a heavy sigh. I really like the tea from that tree. Not to worry, Tartar said. They were smart enough to save a cutting of the tree. They were smart enough to save a cutting of the tree, and we've already got it planted. It'll take a few years to go up, but we'll still be able to enjoy Mamuldebrand's special brew at some point in the future. Oh, looky, a bit. Hello, Bot. Goodbye, Bot.
I am pleased to hear that,
Mamuldebrand said, appearing as if from nowhere.
I
am pleased to hear that, Mamuldebrand said, appearing as if from nowhere. Or rather, my rage is lessened by the news. We did not gather here to discuss my anger, though. Didn't we? Tartar asked with a grin. I thought the whole point of this hearing was to discuss how Archfey were made without your consent. Isn't that one of the things that you were sore about? Mamuldebrand stared at Tartar, obviously trying to make the Archfey's head explode with willpower alone. I found myself becoming a tad impatient at their antics, so I clashed my teeth loudly. So I clashed my teeth loudly to snap the king of the Archfey out of it. He glanced at me with an ineffectual annoyance, then cleared its throat. Algebron, please perform the introduction so that we may get started, Mamuldebrand said. We have lots to discuss. Ooh, that hydration is fighting back. End of a chapter. Dun, dun, dun.
Really? Oh, excuse me.
Apparently. I thought I had a decent night's sleep, but yeah, I've been struggling recently. Pretty much since moving to Portugal, I've been struggling to sleep. Not as bad as my worst insomnia moments, but, overall, very inconsistent. And inconsistent sleep messes with the voice. So, it is a worry. Ooh. But we are working to get a sleep study done. Well, I also live in a box with no sun, so that doesn't help. Because to keep out the noise, we keep out the sun. But yeah, sorry. I've got quite a big neck, so I'm at a high risk for sleep apnea. So we just want to make sure that that's not starting, and if it is, take the appropriate action. Because the voice is what brings in the bacon. So we need to do the stuff to keep the voice doing the stuff. Even if it does make me feel like I'm being whiny. Nice. Nice. Holy crap. I mean, we got... This week, I started taking melatonin gummies to see if that'll help. I think they're helping. I'm not sure. But, according to my voice doc, I do require more sleep. Yeah. I just feel like I'm being whiny. Quite honestly. I know I'm not. I know that the voice needs to do the work, so we need to look after the voice, but coming from a blue-collar family is kind of like... Just, deal with it. Yeah, my hopes weren't high anyway. Just okay, let's give it a try. The last time I tried them, that didn't work. Yeah, the fleshy tools are the most difficult ones to deal with. These adverts. Because these are all, what do you call it? Not in-app, on website ads, into website ads. So there are ads for the novels inside the website. Some of them you're like, okay, that is a thing. It exists. Yippee. Alrighty. On to the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 54. Master General Kirian Yith Adventurer level and A. Unknown Volusianian. Wait, are you saying that you're going to drink my phylactery? The skull asked incredulously. Obviously, I jeered. Obviously, I jeered at the defeated lich. The phylactery in question was a completely enclosed glass vial, without a cork or a lid to grant access to its contents. I would have to find a way to break the glass without spilling the precious blood within. Breaking it in such a way that the glass got into the blood would also be inconvenient. I spun the vial in my thumb. I spun the vial between my thumb and forefingers as I pondered the problem. I'd rather you didn't, said the lich. Your opinion is, as noted, as irrelevant. Your opinion as noted as it is irrelevant. That's not just blood, vampire. It's blood that has been thrice cursed and forcefully imbued with dark magics that have been forgotten to time. There's no telling what will happen to you if you drink it. Best case scenario, you die and I'm stuck here as a skull until I find some way to regenerate. You believe that's the best case scenario? Yes, I do. To give an example of many potential worst case scenarios, you could become a flesh-eating mutant, doomed to mindlessly wander these halls until an adventurer puts you out of your misery. Why bother trying to talk me out of drinking this? I asked. It isn't as if it's your only phylactery. I can smell another one lurking around here somewhere. Oh, the skull said. So that's why you haven't killed me. Yes. Now answer my question. I care because I do not know what will happen. I have a deep-seated hatred of surprises. Seems more like a fear. The skull paused, considering its next words. The two are intrinsically linked. Regardless, this is what I came here to do, I said as I set the skull. I said as I set the skull down on the throne and licked the end of the vial. Please, we can probably. The lich trailed off as it was drowned out by the shrill whine of my scorn. The lich trailed out. The lich trailed off as it was doomed. The lich trailed off as it was drowned out by the shrill whine of my claws scoring the glass. Once I had completed the score, I gently squeezed the vial until I heard cracking noises. I repeated this process until the cracking had ceased. Then I flicked the end of the vial, sending it flying and leaving me with a freshly opened phylactery. We can find another way to do whatever it is you're trying to do, the lich pleaded, panic edging into its voice. You don't have to do this. Calm down, I replied with a smirk. Everything will be fine. No, it won't. You're about to make a terrible... The skull's semi-ethereal voice seemed to fade away as the overbearing smell of magically enriched blood made its way to my nostrils. The coppery smell that I was more familiar with had always been infuriating to a degree, but this was far more than that. It felt as if it were demanding that I drink it. My fangs involuntarily grew, forcing my mouth open. In the back of my mind, I knew what was happening. The being in my dreams had told me of whispers and the effects. Despite this knowledge, my hand moved towards my mouth of its own volition, and I lacked any desire to stop it. A single drop of the blood touched my tongue, and shockwaves of pure pleasure spread throughout my body. It was like... It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. Better than the most delicious dessert. Better than the gentle massage after a long exercise. Better even than making love. I shuddered in ecstasy before draining the phylactery in one gulp. For the briefest of moments, I had found bliss. Every ache and pain was gone, replaced by a kind and loving warmth that embraced every last corner of my body. Then the pleasure turned to an equal and opposite measure of pain. It felt as if all of my muscles and tendons were trying to move in opposite directions, fighting each other in the process. My bones began to creak. My bones began to creak. My bones began to creak as if they were breaking. and I heard a scream as I was forced into doubling over. I briefly became aware of the fact that the screaming was coming from my own mouth before I fell to the ground. My head smashed against the smooth tiles, and I was suddenly free from the pain, floating in a void that was rapidly becoming familiar.
Finally,
The raspy voice said.
I was beginning to think that you had somehow missed what you needed to do.
What? I ran out of breath and suddenly cursed myself for even trying at this point. What happened?
You drank the Lich's phylactery, just as you were meant to. Now you will have power.
I remember pain. So much pain. Too much pain to survive.
I am jealous. The ability to feel this. The ability to feel must be so wonderful and interesting, to say the least.
But why did it hurt so much?
Power can only be gained through pain, either your own or someone else's. In this case, your pain was necessary. Your body is reconfiguring itself, which is exactly as pleasant as it sounds.
What is it reconfiguring into?
Is that a hint of vanity I hear in your voice?
It laughed.
Are you worried for your physical appearance? No need. You will retain your appearance, though your musculature will be mildly larger than it was before. The reconfiguration mostly impacts your internal organs, and fangs, of course.
That doesn't answer my question.
It's less fun.
That doesn't answer my question.
It's less fun if I have to give you the answers to everything.
The being sighed.
Oh, fine. I'll spoil the surprise. You are becoming a being this world has not seen since before the Cataclysm Wars. A master vampire.
Its answer left me speechless. It is common knowledge that vampires become more powerful as time passes, growing in strength, speed, magical prowess, and even intelligence. However, this growth is dramatic. This growth is as dramatic as it is mysterious, and does not occur in brood or half-breeds. As such, I dismissed the knowledge as quickly as I had been forced to learn it. All of it came flooding back, though, as I struggled to cope with what I had just been told. Master vampires are the penultimate form of vampire ascendancy. They are faster, stronger, and capable of much more devastating magical feats than any other vampire. Some vampires spend their entire lives trying to discover how to become a master. Unfortunately, no vampire wants another vampire to become a master. Masters can use their powers of suggestion on lesser vampires, forcing their intentions upon them as if they were mere fledglings or brood. As a result, all of the research into how to become a master was as jealously guarded as it was fruitless. There's nothing more terrifying to a vampire than to have all their plans and schemes laid low by a master vampire who has need of them. Of course, these hypnotic powers have limits. I do not know specifically whose limits. Yep, definitely super soldier serum. These hypnotic powers have limits. I don't know specifically what those limits are, but there were at least 10 masters in the ages before the Cataclysm Wars. 4 of them fell to mortal enemies. 2 of them fell to other masters, and the rest fell to betrayal. This includes the founder of the Night Kingdom, who was usurped. Who was usurped? A master vampire, I finally said. And what am I to do with this gift?
Your only obligation to me is to do what comes natural to you. It'll take you some time to get used to your new body, though, and bear in mind that consuming blood is no longer optional. You need less of it than a standard vampire does, but you will perish if you do not feed.
I don't suppose you can tell me where I can find blood?
It is within my capabilities, yes. There is a town relatively nearby, to the southeast of the entrance of the dungeon. There is a hidden tunnel that leads to an abandoned manor within the town. The locals believe this manor is haunted, and most avoid it if they can. Won't a drow stand out in a dwarven town? The town is racially mixed, but yes, a drow will stand out. That won't be a problem. Why not? I cannot say. I am already towing the line regarding what I can tell you. I understand. I'll find the hidden tunnel. Can you tell me more about my abilities? Not in detail. Suffice it to say that you're in for a surprise after your first meal. The entity began to laugh, and before I could ask it to clarify, my eyes snapped open. I took in a breath and noticed smells that I hadn't noticed before. Even the smells that I had noticed before smelled more defined and pungent. My ears were ringing, and I tried to put my hand to my forehead to soothe the ache behind my eyes. Instinctively, my head tilted to the right as my right hand sailed past it, as it smashed into the floor. And smashed into the floor, cracking the stone tiles. I stared at the broken tiles in shock for a few moments before I realized the ringing in my ears had turned to buzzing. Buzzing that sounded suspiciously like someone attempting to communicate with me. I closed my eyes, shook my head, and swallowed to clear my ears of pressure. Do you still have your wits about you, vampire? Asked the Lich. Or have you been driven to madness by the potency of my blood? Do not worry for me, Lich. I am cognizant of my surroundings, I said with a grin that demonstrated my new fangs. Gods, your fangs! What the hell's happened to you? I licked my teeth, inadvertently shredding my tongue in the process. I quickly closed my mouth to hide the splendor. I pretended to clear my throat as I waited for my tongue to heal enough to reply. For centuries, perhaps millennia, vampires have been wishing to do what I've just done. Yet for all of their studies and efforts, the half-breed has accomplished it first, I said with a laugh. I've ascended. Ascended? What do you... The Lich trailed off for a moment. Oh, I see. You're a master vampire now. Correct. And now I must seek a source of nutrition. Where is the secret tunnel to your city nearby? I'm not helping you until you kill me. I stared at the eyeless skull and felt the straw... And felt it staring back at me. We continued this contest of gazes in silence for a few moments before I sighed and shrugged. So be it. I'll find it myself, I said, rising from the ground to study the walls. You're going to leave me here, then? What better place for you than your throne? This isn't my throne. Then whose? I trailed off as I found a disguised switch. No, it doesn't matter. I have no more important matters to attend. I have more important matters to attend to. I pressed the switch, and a door hidden within the core... I pressed the switch, and a door hidden within the wall silently slid open. I looked back towards the Lich with a cruel grin. Farewell, Lich. Fret not. I'll return soon. I hope not. I laughed and entered the hidden passage. I found another switch inside, which closed the hidden door behind me. This passage led to another room filled with odds and ends that indicated that it was a mixture of an apothecary and library, both of which had seen extensive use fairly recently. I explored this area, finding several rooms in various states of disrepair. I found a kitchen, a room with several destroyed beds, an armory full of rusty equipment, empty jail cells, a dining hall with rotted furniture, a surgical suite, and an abandoned altar to a long-forgotten malignant entity. Finally, I came across the tunnel that my own malignant entity had spoken of. As I traveled this tunnel, I realized that it opened up many possibilities for me. Instead of leaving the corpses where they lay, I could bring them back with me and create my own vampire horde. I could even purchase the manor at the end of this passage, becoming a well-respected member of the town. Before long, I could take control of the town and raise an actual army. With this army, I could attack the Night Kingdom with no need of With this army, I could attack the Night Kingdom with no need of plots or secrecy. Then the vampires that managed to survive King Lofin's purge would be forced to bow to my will. I would be able to expand our borders, using the drow as fodder for brood. It was with these pleasant thoughts in mind that I came to the end of the tunnel. I found another switch, opening another secret door and allowing me access to the manor. It was decrepit, and it was decrepit. I had entered into the foyer, and a great marble columns covered the mold and moss greeted me. I had entered the foyer, and great marble columns covered in mold and moss greeted me. The two larger columns held the seating, and four smaller ones held up the staircase, in the center of which had collapsed. The giant windows surrounding the doors had all been broken and boarded up. The tile flooring was partly covered by a rug that must have cost a lifetime's worth of earnings, but was now as worthless as the detritus covering it. Even through all the wear and tear and time, even through all the wear and tear of time, I could see how splendid this place had once been. I found myself a little jealous, for my own manor could hardly compare. I wondered what had caused this town's populace to find it so loathsome, but my theorizing was interrupted by a very welcome scent. Prey. I quickly and quietly tracked the scent and found someone sleeping in what had been the dining room. An obviously homeless elf was resting on a table which had lost its legs. The smell of his day-to-day life. The smell of his day-to-day life was repugnant, but thankfully he was overwhelmed by the scent of his lifeblood. Happy to find him my first meal and potentially my first lackey, I bit into him with such speed that he didn't even have time to wake up before his blood was gushing into my narrator. I bit into him with such speed that he didn't even have time to wake before his blood was gushing into my waiting maw. I greedily gulped it down in record time, feeding the warm flood through me. Even after his heart stopped, I drank until there was no blood remaining. I dropped the elf and instinctively felt a change occur within me. My current physical form, malleable. I can change, bend, morph into something else. Someone else, even. I can grow taller or shorter, fatter or thinner, darker or lighter. While the process of changing is magical, the change itself is physical in nature and cannot be detected via magical means. Shapeshifting, a skill that many of the fair folk use to wreak mischief and mayhem amongst mortals. The knowledge of this ability and its endless possibilities swarmed my mind even as my newest victim looked up at me. His newly acquired fangs were on full show within the childish grin. I stood, and he moved into a kneeling position, still looking up at me with the same expression. "Are you ready to serve me?" I asked. "Yes, master." End of story. End of chapter. Alright, I'm going to step away momentarily. I shall be right back. I'm going to give you music and chair.
back and dropped something on the floor. Not exactly sure what. Or where it went. Alrighty. Second story done. Yeah, or I stand on it with my bare foot. That'll probably be the thing to happen. Okay, 33.
Alrighty. Some hydration.
Yep. And then on to the next.
Ugh.
Alright.
Billy Bob, 33. No, 33.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob Space Trucker, and is part of a series. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 33. Lieutenant Commander Lewis scratched his chin as he looked around at the assembled Xenos. The ship he was on was bigger than his by a great deal. His Bouncer-class heavy escort had a crew of 50, which was why he wasn't even a full commander and yet commanded a ship. But here he was, on a Xeno ship that needed a crew of around 1,000, and they'd surrendered to him. When the 3 kitchen systems had surrendered to the first scout ship that jumped into range, the brass had assumed that it was a fluke. Just a bunch of terrified colonists who didn't understand the scout ships weren't the sign of a large invasion force. But now, 15 US Marines were occupying 3 whole planets. So they figured they'd send a few ships out this way to scout the kitchen systems a bit more and see what was going on. He'd been chosen since the Longhorn convoys didn't need an escort, and his ship class was in a bit of an odd spot for the current war. When he jumped into a slightly more developed kitchen system, he found the ship his computer wanted to classify as a heavy battlecruiser or a light dreadnought already within range. Assuming the worst, he began to fire upon the ship and figured if worst came to worst, he'd sacrifice the ship and drive it into their bridge to take it out of the war for a while. Instead, he hadn't even begun true combat action when they surrendered, having never fired a shot. So now he and all 50 Marines in his command were standing on the Xeno capital ship's hangar, looking at around 200 officers. Most of them were Kitchens, which he had expected since this was kitchen space. What he didn't expect was a dozen or so space hamsters, and he sure as hell didn't expect them to be wearing top hats or fancy military uniforms that looked straight out of the late 1800s, with mutton chops and sashes and outrageous-looking medals, except worn by hamsters. The Kitchens were humanoid cat people, as far as he was concerned, but not the sort of vicious space predators he expected cats in space to be. These were all between 4 and 5 feet tall, and more of the... These were all between 4 and 5 feet tall, and more of the house cat variety. From what he understood, the ship had been a joint project between the two species. But as he looked around the hangar, it didn't seem like either race was going to be sought after shipbuilders anytime soon. It was spaceworthy, but he wasn't sure he'd want to take it into combat. He could see the areas where they patched electrical panels already, and in a few places that didn't look even or level. And he figured, if they didn't look right to the naked eye, they must be really messed up to any actual measurements. And this was the hangar. It was just supposed to be a big open area for smaller ships to dock. If they messed that up, what was the engine room or bridge like? Not to mention, he hated the design in general. Shrugging it off, he looked at his tech that was setting up the projector, who finally nodded and gave him a thumbs up. He coughed for a moment and then tapped the mic he'd been given as everyone momentarily groaned and shied away from the feedback noise until the tech got it corrected. All right, I'm Lieutenant Commander Lewis of the U.S. Navy. The officer you surrendered to. We're holding this meeting to field questions and explain a few things. He nodded to the tech, who tapped a button and brought up the first slide. Lewis shook his head for a moment as he looked at the font and color choice, wondering where the hell the tech had gone to school. Right, first off, we can't feed or house more than a few of you. My ship isn't made for that, and since your ship lacks skip drive capacity, you have to wait here until we figure out what to do. Questions? The one space hamster raised his hand. How will we get supplies? How were you getting supplies? How were you getting them before? The local colony sent us food. Well, I guess you'll have to use what you have until we get supplies out here for you. What if the local colony surrendered? Then they could resume sending supplies, I guess? Oh, in that case they surrender. Lewis blinked at the space hamster with 1800-style uniform, complete with fancy frilly hat. It's a kitchen colony. You can't just expect them to follow your commands, Lewis said, with a shake of his head. That's my cue. That's my cue. The kitchen stepped forward. If he had to say, it looked like a tuxedo cat with a monocle and a white moustache. No. Wait. That was just white fur. No, wait. Yes. But he was also wearing an actual tuxedo and a top hat. I am in charge of the colony in question. We surrender also. You were on the ship. Oh, no, we arrived a short time ago once we heard that you were here. Lewis looked at the Marine lieutenant, who just shrugged. Okay, so, then the colony can keep sending you food. There were nods of agreement from the crowd, and Lewis frowned as he saw his tech drawing something before putting it up on the projector. It was a decent drawing of the planet, and a shuttle with an arrow moving towards a rough drawing of the ship. So that was it. His tech was an art major. He made a mental note to leave the tech behind with the Marines and get a new one. The next question you had was if you can move to one of our colonies to live out the war in a prison camp where you didn't have to fight. This seems to be a very pressing question you have, and unfortunately the answer is no. There were groans as he heard a few scattered people asking why not. This is because all of our colonies are on death worlds. Everyone got quiet. All of them? Asked a hamster up front. Yes, every single one. We give the garden planets and the like to the UHG, so instead we're probably going to just make a prison camp on the colony here, and that's where you'll live. They all seemed to nod at that as well.
He saw the tech scribble something else, and he saw the tech scribble something else out, and then put up a picture of the camp with hamsters and cats in it. Lewis rolled his eyes for a moment, but now wasn't the time to wonder how he ended up with an art major for a tech. "What about meals?" asked another of the overly fancy uniformed hamsters. "What? We just went over this. You'll keep getting food from the colony." "That was for food in general, yes. But will we get some... But will we get to eat 5 meals a day?" Lewis arched a brow in a mixture of surprise and confusion. But then he realized he didn't know how big their meals were, or how long a day was, so he wasn't sure if there was a lot or a little. "And what about naps?" asked one of the kitchens. "Well, we haven't figured out the logistics, obviously. I assume that if you took naps and ate 5 times a day here on the ship, then you can keep doing that down on the colony?" Soon there was a picture of a cat napping in the sun and a hamster eating what he thought was a cake. Lewis wasn't sure if the art from the tech was helping, or just trying to make the most of his likely wasted education. "As our prisoners, of course, you'll be treated fairly, and, obviously, since there are far more of you than there are of us, it'll take some time to get things going." "Would it help if we made the prison camp?" one of the kitchens asked. Lewis looked around the hangar bay at all the mistakes he could see. Can you build a prison camp easily? I mean, if we're allowed to build it like we do normally buildings, If we're allowed to build it like we do normal buildings, sure. This ship was really hard, though, since we were using designs that we weren't familiar with." "Yeah, I'd been meaning to ask that. Weren't the hamsters helping you build it?" "Of course. But we'd never built one before. The council didn't really think that we could, but the kitchens were really... But the kitchens were willing to help us, so we mostly paid for it and designed it and oversaw the construction," said one of the fancier hamsters. "So, none of you have ever built a ship like this?" So, none of you had ever actually built a ship like this? They shook their heads. "Well, that explains a few things. Sure, I guess you can build the prison camp too." One of the fancy-dressed kitchens, this time, raised a hand. "Yes? How come you aren't dressed like us?" Lewis frowned at that and looked down at his uniform. It was just a standard light military pressure suit. He hadn't been willing to change into his formals or even garrison uniform when entering a captive dreadnought. Why would I?" "Well, our uniforms are based on what we found on your planet a while back. They had the fanciest pants we had ever seen." They had the fanciest pants we'd ever seen," a hamster with additional mutton chop fur said with a nod, as the kitchens seemed to agree. It's impractical. You guys based your uniforms on ours because they were really fancy." More nodding. We don't wear those anymore. Any other questions? When do we get to meet he who will deliver us?" "What?" "The human who will deliver us, the great deliverer." "I have no idea who you're talking about." "Surely you must." There was murmuring amongst the crowd as they seemed little concerned over his lack of knowledge. Lewis was obviously confused. Then he saw a kitchen hand his tech something. Then the crowd all grew hushed at the picture on the screen behind him. It was a picture of a longhorn and some sort of motto. "Your delivery guaranteed, or my name isn't Billy Bob, Space Trucker." See, this is a missed opportunity for a great joke. The joke being that he needs to misspell the name. Billy Bob. Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Emily was slowly shaking her head as she stood in the cargo bay. "What are you doing?" "Wax on, wax off." Billy Bob was still in the Borg power suit, having spent one of her sleep cycles practicing at the thing. Now he was making strange motions with his limbs. "Crane kick!" He hopped on one foot and lashed out. "Daniel, son! Here!" He made a chopping motion with his hands. Then he stopped, arms rising up to a strange square angle. "Hey! Hey, Emily! What am I?" She blinked as she watched him start to move around in jerky, rough motions. She couldn't tell if it looked like he was doing... She couldn't tell if it looked like he was being controlled by strings. Greetings, ladies. Strings. Blinked as she watched him. She blinked as she watched him start to move around in jerky, rough motions. She couldn't tell if it looked like he was being controlled by strings or some sort of automated program. A puppet? What? No, come on! He turned his upper body and kept moving in those strange, jerky movements. "I don't know, Billy Bob," she said as she rested one hand on her cheek as she watched him. "Here's a hint. Domo arigato." That doesn't translate. "Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto." "Emily, come on." He started to sing, of course being off-key. "Hey, domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. I'm a modern. Hey, domo arigato, Roboto. I am a modern man. Secret, I got to secret." He stopped, and then sighed. He stopped then and sighed before turning the speakers hidden in the fur of his suit. When the actual song started to play, Emily let out a slow sound of understanding. "Oh, the song!" "Yeah, what else would I be referencing? Come on, Space Assassin, you gotta keep up. Here, I've been practicing for ages now. Watch what I can do." He stood in front of his long horn and shifted rapidly from foot to foot for a moment, wiggling and waving his hands as he seemed to get ready. Then he crouched down and jumped, only to sail away up into the ceiling of the cargo bay, letting out rather unmanly squeal of surprise and come crashing down on the other side of the ship with a heavy thud. "Billy Bob!" Emily rushed over, but the human in the Borg suit was pushing himself back up, waving it off. No, I'm okay. I forgot I practiced in my gravity and then lowered it before you got up. Nothing serious." He brushed himself off and then started to lean one way and then the other to stretch out. "I'm getting the hang of it." She was crossing all of her arms as she looked at him. "So it would seem. You haven't left that thing in hours, so I'd expect you'd get better." "I need to test other things, though, like coordination." He looked around and then moved over to some empty crates that had been left over from the original owners of Rosie. He started to lay them out as he looked back over his shoulder. "Can you get some stuff to drink on the Longhorn? Wait, do space hamsters drink space tea?" "A very, very weakened version of it compared to our tastes," she said, as he rubbed his chin, then shrugged. "Sure, brew that up, and come back out here when it's done." "Why don't you?" "'Cause Mittens will freak out if he sees a Borg." Emily nodded at that, and then stepped into the Longhorn, leaving Billy Bob behind. Emily nodded at that, and then stepped into the Longhorn, leaving Billy Bob behind. She pulled the tea out, setting about brewing the very weak version of it, like she'd been asked. When she stepped outside with a pot of weak tea on a tray and a few of his cups, she found Billy Bob had set up a crates as a rough collection of chairs around a table and had the council senator and his chief sneaky busybody sitting around it. "What are we doing, Billy Bob?" she asked, looking around with a bit of confusion. "Surely you must know what we're doing, Surely you must know what we're doing, old diplomat." She shook her head. "A tea party, but not a Boston kind." The others just stared at him. "Don't worry about it." Emily moved forward, setting the tray down in the crate. She started to reach for the pot, but Billy waved her off. Slowly, he closed and opened his hand, and then delicately picked up the pot, shaking a little as he poured some of the tea into a cup. Then he picked up the cup with two big blue fingers and held it out for the counselor. "Oh, I must say, most splendid." "Oh, they scrum-diddly. What the fuck is that?" "Oh, are there any scrum-piddles or fluffer pillows?" I don't know what those are, so no. Oh, most bothersome. Can we get some? Sure, the counselor set his cup down. Sure, the counselor set his cup down and got up to go find whatever the hell he wanted. Billy Bob poured out a second cup for the chief sneaky busybody, who looked a little nervous as Billy Bob in the pork pile suit moved the cup filled with hot liquid over to him. The cup rattled a little in his hand as Billy Bob probably overthought the controls, but then he released it gently as the spy visibly relaxed. Thank you. Do you mind if I also go get some treats? No. You sit here and wait. We need to keep this tea party rolling. In fact, let's kick this up a notch. He picked up one of the remaining cups, handing it to Emily empty. Then he picked up the teapot, and the little rattling... Then he picked up the teapot. The little rattling, a little as... The little rattling, a little... The lid rattling? The lid rattling a little as he moved it over her lap as she clutched the cup. She shifted a little as he leaned over her with the hot teapot, his hand shifting and shaking a little. But she moved the cup to follow it and soon had a cup of weak tea. Look at that! Look at how good I am! He leaned up and cheered, the teapot flying from his hand into the air, hot tea flying out of it as Emily and the hamster squealed and dived to avoid it. Billy Bob cursed and moved to catch it. Billy Bob moved to catch it, hoping a bit. Billy Bob moved to catch it, hopping a bit, and catching a foot on the edge of the crate as he fell onto his face, arm outstretched as he caught the teapot. Still got it! Bravo, bravo! The chief fancy pants had returned with a bag of full pastries. Bravo, bravo! The chief fancy pants had returned with a big bag full of pastries, which he was stuffing into his mouth, crumbs tumbling down his chin. The spy quickly scurried over to grab a few of the pastries as Emily stood back up while dusting himself off. Okay, so maybe a tea party was a bad idea. Okay, maybe a tea party was a bad idea, but I'm really getting the hang of this thing, Billy Bob said as he looked around the cargo bay, as if trying to find something else to test himself with. All right, we get it. You're getting good. Just get out of there already, Emily said as Billy Bob sighed. All right. Enough of the suit today, I guess. The hatch opened at the back, and he had to squirm and wiggle his way out. Getting his upper body out first was looking... Getting his upper body out first before looking around, hanging partially from the suit. Wait, how, He was very dense. He was a very dense creature from a super heavy gravity planet. There wasn't a person in the ship who could help pull him free. He tried to sit up further, hugging the head of the fake Bork, his upper body free, but he wasn't sure how to pull his legs out and not just fall to the ground. Oh, I know. There was a chime through the cargo bay and a flashing light as the gravity turned off. Emily squawked out while the hamsters squeaked, arms flailing as they tried to grab the pastries they were floating away from the bag. Arms flailing as they tried to grab the pastries that were floating away from their bag. Billy Bob quickly pulled his legs out of the suit and righted himself with a smile. Emily had extended her wings for a moment and smiled, jumping up into the air and scooping up the floating hamsters. Her wings flapped as she easily moved through the zero-G environment. Then she looked down as Billy Bob waved his hands. Toss them to me! Billy Bob, I don't know how to aim. Just try it. I'll catch him. Oh, jolly good to sail through the air like a smickerblat. So much fun. Emily shrugged and then flapped her wings to hold steady, and then part tossed, part shoved the fancy pants hamster down at Billy Bob. He pushed off his suit lightly and floated out to catch the hamster, who was laughing as he held his top hat in place while flailing. Who was laughing as he held his top hat in place while falling. Now the other one, Billy Bob said, clutching the first hamster in a single-armed hug. Please don't. I'm a little nauseous. But Emily was already trying to aim as she tossed and shoved the hamster down towards Billy Bob. As he spun through the air, the chief's sneaky busybody squeaked and then threw up, blobs of pastry flying out of his mouth. They jiggled and wobbled in the 0 G as They jiggled and wobbled in the 0 G as Billy Bob and Fancy Pants had horrified looks on their faces before Billy Bob dived out of the way. The hamster hit the deck, bouncing off it lightly, since they were still in 0 G, the vomit floating above him. Then there was a warning throughout the ship for some reason. The Rosie had to shift the power. Then there was a warning throughout the ship, as for some reason the Rosie had to shift the power, so that the gravity came back on as the spy squealed just before the blobs of eaten pastry rained down on him. A voice came over the PA. The Libertonian ship was a little closer than expected. Sorry for the evasive maneuvers. We'll be docking with them shortly. Emily glided back down to the ground and walked over to Billy Bob and the Fancy Pants, looking down at the other hamster, who was lying on the ground looking worse for wear. Harumph, a bit of sticky wicky wucket. No, but no harm. A nice shower will cheer you up. Yeah, I'll take him to the crew's locker room, Billy Bob said, carefully picking the fluffy spy up, avoiding the sticky bits. Emily moved a few crates around while he was gone to cover up the few leftover blobs of mess. It wouldn't look good if the other Libertonians started asking what the hell was going on the Rosie before they got there. Soon enough, Billy Bob returned with a smile. This is kind of exciting. I've never actually met any other Libertonians. Now I get to compare you to everyone else from your species. Emily blinked at that and looked over at him with a mixture of confusion and anxiety. Seeing her expression, he just laughed and shook his head. Don't look so worried. I already picked you on a comparison against all females of my species that I know. You'll do fine. They waited as they heard the boarding tube extend much as it had from the space goblins the day before. But this time, the figures that stepped out were much taller, their figures cloaked in those shadowy black suits that Billy Bob had first seen Emily in. He realized now that she wasn't lying about being shorter than most of her kin. They all appeared to be several inches taller than her. Their wing colors were various shades and patterns, but they all had black tips. Emily seemed to recognize them despite the masks, however. Jonas, so good to see you again. You must be in charge then, she said, stepping forward towards one of the big figures. But before he could respond, another voice from the back of the group spoke up. Wrong as usual, Emily. I'm in charge here. The other stepped away as another female figure stepped forward. She seemed to be about the same height as Emily, despite all the taller ones around them. Emilia, but if you're here, then who's guarding hell? You're lucky that even there. You're lucky they even let you do more than mop the floors. How do you ever manage to graduate from the academy is a mystery to me. That's because you're a horrible spy. You're probably still confused why no one took you to the dance. Clearly it was because your colors are drab and your feathers are sparse. The Libertonian's wings stiffened at that. The feathers obviously ruffled at the implication. She reached up and pulled her mask free to reveal the crimson-colored feathers, with blue eyes that briefly made Billy Bob wonder if she'd been eating the spice melange. She walked towards Billy Bob, running her hand along his chin for a moment, before turning back to Emily. Her wings smacking Billy Bob in the face for a moment as he closed his eyes. So this is the famous human that you found. He's easy on the eyes. It would be a shame if my superior coloring would entice him to leave you. Billy Bob didn't even have time to curse before both women had their gloves off, razor-sharp talons bare, their wings spreading wide. But unlike the last time where Emily tried to keep between him and her target, they started to circle and around one another. They made those strange chirps as they moved. The other Libertonians hadn't really reacted and just backed up, standing near his longhorn before one of the males waved him over. Hello, I'm Jonas. It's nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Billy Bob. He held his fist out as it was He held his fist out and was about to explain to Thomas actually to give him a... He held his fist out and was about to explain when Thomas actually gave him a fist bump without coaching. Well, damn, is human culture catching on with you guys? When your normal form of greeting involves crushing your hands into a display of strength. When your normal form of greeting involves crushing our hands in a display of strength, we find alternate ways to greet you. Billy Bob nodded at that, and then watched Emily and Amelia snap at each other. And then watched Emily and Amelia snap out at one another. The red feathers Emily had only bared in her display back in the CIA agent were on display, and Amelia's red wings and black tips were displaying bright blue feathers amongst the red. Is this normal? For them it is. Should we stop them? I'm not getting involved. I don't feel like getting a face full of talons. Besides, they're young. Let them fight it out. The Libertonian shrugged and crossed his arms. Wait, if they're young, how did they both get such important jobs? Jonas shrugged for a moment. Well, when you're good at killing people and you come from families like those, you just get promoted pretty quickly. I guess we should try and stop the fight, though. We need to discuss getting the two of you down to the planet. Well, I have an idea. Do you have one of those super fancy pocket dimensions? The Libertonian unhooked it. The Libertonian unhooked one of those strange devices from his belt, holding it out. Billy Bob touched the activation button to get the blue glow going. Hey, you two, I'm jumping into another dimension now. Then leaned into the blue tear as his body seemed to get sucked into the device. Emily and Amelia stopped as they looked over, wings quickly lowering. Wait, but that will kill him, Amelia said, obviously confused. Emily let out an annoyed chirp. No, apparently he can survive. She walked over, looking into the light. Looking down into the light. Billy Bob, you get out here right now. I swear, I have to keep an eye on you. I have to keep an eye on him or he gets into all kinds of trouble. Amelia stood next to her, looking down into the blue void. Billy Bob, can he hear us? Hello, human. Inside the dimension, Billy Bob was floating in that same blue stuff. Looking around, he saw some sort of strange device, and then his eyebrows arced up in surprise as he began swimming towards the object he spotted. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. Dun dun dun. Pew pew pew. Nope. Pew pew pew. 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 Pew pew. Ooh. I think it's time. Booba juice time. Very much, Lord Volpex. Very much. I mean, it could only have been better if he asked him to hold his beer. Cheers, Georgie. Thank you for popping past. It is very much appreciated.
Ding. 247. Alien minds. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read T-Pass, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Alien Minds, written by Crumb J.D. There was a lot of excitement in the telepathic buzz of the Turk's ambassadorial corps as the human ship drew close. Even the chargé d'affaires was broadcasting more than a bit of excitement, and normally he liked to maintain an air of utter unflappability. Still, who could blame him? The humans were really exciting. First off, it seemed like they might be mentally compatible with the Turks. First off, it seemed like they might be mentally compatible with the Turks' psychology. That level of compatibility was rare, not just for the Turks, but for any race. In fact, it was more common for two species to be so different they couldn't even agree on the basic facts of the universe, find names for all of each other's emotions, or agree on absolutely basic standards of behavior and morality. Trade between species could exist, but it was carried out by trained and closely supervised personnel. For the most part, that was the closest two races really. For the most part, that was as close as the two races could get. Of course, some worlds existed where different species mingled, but they typically managed simply foraging all laws. The resultant societies never lasted long. They'd become havens for drug production, child slavery. They'd become havens for drug production, child slavery, silverware misuse. Or clock manufacture, and eventually a more powerful polity would grasp them. That was a shame. When two species could get along well enough to work or even live side by side, they reaped enormous benefits. To start, they doubled their territory and military might overnight. Longer term, there were tremendous economic and scientific rewards as the different aptitudes of the races meshed. That was why the ambassadorial corps ended up acting like a bunch of deranged matchmakers forever searching for the one. To overextend that metaphor, matching with humans would be like finding a real love connection with a beautiful heiress who had a great sense of humor. Human technology was just incredible. They were one of those races that could build things of mind-boggling complexity. The ship the ambassadorial corps was meeting with was a good example. It contained weapons, conference rooms, crew rec facilities, and much besides. The Turks couldn't even translate the language of most races that built ships like that. Kree was distracted from the thought by the appearance of the objective of the Kree was distracted from the thought by the appearance of the objects of his professional affection walking through the semi-permanent passage that connected the Kree and human ships while negotiations were ongoing. The young engineer didn't broadcast his first emotion upon seeing them. They definitely were only like beautiful heiress metaphorically. Kree had known that they were bipedal and bilaterally symmetrical. He'd even seen pictures and videos of them. But in person, it just looked wrong. They were so stretched out and unstable looking. If one of them stopped balancing for even an instant, they'd surely collapsed instantly. Not that it seemed to bother them. Kree had assumed they'd move by sliding their feet forward, but no, they had a stride similar to that of them. They had a stride similar to the Turks lifting a foot entirely off the ground to move it. In fact, it didn't stop there. They had seemed quite content to take both feet off the ground and just jump or fall forward.
For a moment, Creaky tried to work out the calculus of it, but that was a losing proposition. Broadly speaking, their limbs were first-class levers, and they moved a bit like an inverted pendulum, but it was all too irregular. They moved their arms and legs and even centers of mass as they walked, throwing off balance as their movement. Throwing off the balance of their movement. Or rather, it would have thrown off that balance, but they shifted at tiny increments so smoothly that they never wavered. He couldn't keep up with it at all, and for the first time, Creaky wondered if he'd been handed an impossible task. He was supposed to figure out how they built the mighty ships. He was wondering if they did it by being way smarter than the Turkris. It doesn't affect the weapons. Creaky was no expert in human vocal patterns. It doesn't affect the weapons. Creaky was no expert in human vocal patterns, but even his limited training said the engineer was talking to was angry. But even his limited training said the engineer he was talking to was angry. Well, that was fine. Creaky was also pissed. When he stepped aboard the ship, he'd been given a small device to translate his telepathic broadcast to something a human could understand. At the moment, he hung dull and unlit It hung dull and unlit at his breast, or rather, it glowed in a portion of the near-infrared that humans could see, but Turkis couldn't. That color meant anger to humans. It is an electrical system. Of course it has an impact on your other electrical systems. The weapons are isolated. They have their own power plants then. What? No, I mean, they have backups, but I already showed you the annihilation generator. It runs everything. Then what do your words mean? If they are interconnected, he meshed his phalanges, then they affect one another. He wiggled some of the phalanges, but not others. They all moved. The telepathy converter had shifted to a deep green. Confusion. Okay, yes, sure, they're linked into fashion. Okay, sure, they are linked after a fashion. I mean, I guess a big enough shock to the third cargo bay auxiliary lighting could, hypothetically, propagate to the weapons systems. But what you're talking about, the humans trailed off. His expression now looked exactly like the pre-mission examples of confusion. Creaky broadcast an emotion that his translator couldn't handle, causing it to ripple in a quick rainbow pattern. On the one plate, it was astounding to be moving in such mental sync with such an alien being, but at the balancing plate, the humans seemed utterly mad. Or at least their engineers were. He hadn't dealt with the cooks or lawyers. Apparently, the cooks and lawyers were great. The cooks had worked with the medical and biological science officers to both sides. The cooks had worked with the medical and biological science officers of both sides and come up with foods everyone could eat, blended out of the traditional ingredients of both races. The lawyers, meanwhile, were pounding out a simple framework of law that would allow trade and military support almost instantly, while simultaneously holding the potential to be extended to a full joint colonization or an exchange of citizens. Creaky learned about this during the weekly meeting of the diplomatic mission, and it made him resentful, being the only black mark in the otherwise glowing field of shiny progress in the Charged Affairs Broadcast Inquiry, and asked, "An engineer?" "And engineering?" "The humans are, they are friendly, happy to answer all questions, quite comfortable to interact with. I feel I'm already starting to learn their methods of nonverbal communication. I feel there is nothing that should hold up our relations." "Yes, but their technology." Creaky held back from broadcasting his frustrations for a long moment before deciding he might as well be honest and letting it go in a rush that made everyone else at the meeting lean away from him. "They're nuts. I don't know if it's some manner of obfuscation or something deeper, but they can't seem to answer any question about how their technology works. I mean, they can't tell me the concepts easily enough. But if I try... They can tell me the concepts easily enough. But if I try to get into interactions with interrelations, they spout madness. I ask, for example, how the forward armor impacts the I asked, for example, how the forward armor impacts the integrity of the main conference room, and the human just looked at me as if my words didn't translate. Cree drew a deep breath and continued. However, he did understand the words because he said what they always say. It doesn't. Which is crazy because that conference room is the biggest void in their ship, and the armor is the heaviest part of the ship, and it's nearly as far as you can get from the main thrusters. The combination of factors must be the biggest structural issue in the whole ship. I presumed you explained that. I shouldn't have had to. It's very basic engineering. Still, I pointed it out and asked again, but he just talked about load-bearing structures and whatnot, and how they were strong enough with or without the room. It was as though you shouldn't even think about a great whacking void in the middle of your ship when designing all that. The charge to affairs admitted mild consternation and disappointment. Still, you say it's not an issue. Let us know if it becomes one. Later, Cree held his telepathic translator up to his guide. Perhaps the human could describe it without resorting to nonsense. Tell me, how does this work then? It went blue, reflecting the curiosity that he was sending out. Okay, sure, that's really simple. Your telepathy isn't anything terribly complex. You just broadcast your emotional state in a low-frequency You just broadcast your emotional state in a low-frequency amplitude-modulated radio waves, so that, he gestured at the device, is basically an antenna, a programmable chip, and a screen hooked together. That's simple. It practically frequency shifts your sendings without an intermediary. Yes. But more specifically, tell me about the battery, the antenna, and the screen. The human shrugged. That was a gesture the Tuskers couldn't translate. It almost seemed to herald their madness. Something along the lines of, that's a detail I will disregard for no reason. That's a detail I'll disregard for no reason I intend to explain. And indeed, the human answered, they're standard. How can that be? You've only built 20 or so of these things. Are you telling me that you already have them standardized? Oh, of course not. They're standard for other things. I think the antenna is from a mobile. A battery is standard flash rechargeable solid-state electrolyte. The screen is thin film OLED, normally sold for disposable displays. The antenna hooks into the display and the battery with the programmable board, normally sold to hobbyists. We 3D printed the plastic parts. You're saying that none of the major parts were designed to work together. The man shrugged. Cree had to suppress the urge to punch him. Not specifically, the man answered at length. In a general way they are. That makes no sense. Here. Cree opened the battery compartment and eyed the wiring on the back of the battery. If I'm reading your language correctly, this is a 6.8 volt, 4,200 milliamp hour battery. Are you saying that the board takes 6.8 volts of power and the ideal duty cycle for the screen was structured around... And the ideal duty cycle for the screens was structured around 4,200 milliamps? The board was a little lower power, if I recall correctly, but we put in a resistor, and a 4,200 is actually a bit much for the screens. It probably hasn't run low on you yet, and it's kind of heavy. All right, so these things perform rather poorly as a system, but you just sort of slapped them together, Cree said in triumph. Here now, they worked well enough. The human sounded offended. Cree was rather proud of himself for picking up from... Cree was rather proud of himself for picking that up from the being's tone. He also didn't blame him. No engineer wanted to have their work insulted, and this one knew enough of the details of the emotional translators the Cree suspected he had been on... That Cree suspected he had been on the design of the device. He was quick to soothe. No, I agree. They're quite ingenious, and it is a marvelous way to solve an engineering problem. It's just... Gregory looked down at his translator to see a new color suffused it as he broadcast a pulse of fear. I'm beginning to believe that you might have built your whole ship this way. What? With standard batteries, resistors, and such? How else would you build a ship? Those parts are... The human trailed off, looking for a metaphor, which apparently found. They're like parts of a body. What? How? Well, okay, you've got a hand. The human looked at Creaker's hand, which, admittedly, wasn't terribly similar to the humans from a metaphorical barrel. Wasn't terribly similar to the humans from a morphological perspective. A sort of hand, anyways. Now, when you want to pick something up, you don't estimate its weight, estimate just how much force it'll take to propel your hand over to it, calculate what it'll take to pull your hand back with the object, figure out that the weight and the effort will do to your body as a whole, and how much oxygen you'll burn by picking up. And how much oxygen you'll burn by picking it up. And how much oxygen you'll burn by picking it up. And then start breathing heavily if you're going to need more air. You use your hand to pick the thing up, and everything else just handles itself. Creakery was silent for a long time. He blinked 7 times, keeping his eyes lubricated. He took 27 breaths, and his heart beat 35 times. He broadcast confusion, and made the translator around his neck glow a perfect green. At length, he stated, That is exactly what I do. The human engineer had hurried them both to the medbay in an attempt to find the ship's doctor while he explained the concepts he only half understood. Humans, it turned out, had 2 forms of muscle, 2 nervous systems, and different parts of the brain to control different parts of the body. Even what they did control, they barely thought about. They didn't do any calculus to move, or consciously estimate the weights of things they wanted to move beyond light and heavy. Humans were practically symbiotes in their own bodies, and it was deeply creepy. So wait, you can close your eyelids intentionally, but when you blink, you don't think about it? Gregory asked the doctor. Yeah, well, now I'm going to have to do that for the next few minutes, the engineer's complaint. Well, now I'm going to have to for the next few minutes. The engineer's complaint illuminated exactly nothing. Yes, the doctor answered. Then he asked a question of his own. You still control basic processes in your sleep? Of course. Their breathing and heartbeats were all just really experienced when they were asleep. That and the slow automatic sifting of memories and experience from the previous day. Creakery broadcast a pulse of discomfort at the idea of sleeping without that connection to the physical world. How would one distinguish between their distorted memories and reality? But surely you have automatic reactions. Creakery pulsed an affirmative. Chemical things. Chemical things. I don't explicitly control the production of enzymes and acids in my digestive system. They're produced by glands that react to the presence or absence of sugars and whatnot. Electrically signal things, those I must think about. Wait, the engineer said, raising his voice to signal excitement. Creakery wondered if he even considered his tone before adopting it. If you have to think about all that stuff all the time, like the interactions between your heart and your legs and your balance and everything, is that why you were always bugging me about crazy interactions in unrelated ship systems? They are not. Yeah, I get that. But to us, they sort of are. I mean, your ankle bone is connected to your shin bone and all of that. But we don't really think about that all the time, and that's how we build our ships. But you don't think about it. But ye do think about it. Creakery considered, then bobbed his head in a way that he hoped the humans would interpret as a nod. Just so, I suppose. We do break big problems down into smaller parts, but not so compulsively as you. And seeing it all as a system, that's just what makes your tiny ship so And seeing it all as a system, that's what makes your tiny ship so insanely performant and durable. We thought you had tech or tricks that we didn't, but you probably just work out every last interaction. And how? and how you understand the mad labyrinths you piled up. The human let out a long, low whistle. It was some sort of emotional expression, presumably a potent one, not one Creakery had been trained in. The human clarified somewhat by speaking, "Think about what we could do together. I bet your species could work bugs out that we'd never see out of their designs, or could even suggest some truly impressive improvements." Creakery did his nod-like thing again. "You would see our way around problems that would block us for years. You would see ways around problems that would block us for years, or even cause a project to be abandoned. We couldn't have built the telepathic translators so quickly." Creakery elevated his heart rate and breathing to oxygenate the compounds rushing into his blood as his excitement triggered a fight-or-flight response. A union between species would be very but as extraordinary as the diplomatic corps had dreamed, and then some. End of story. I think. Okay, that is all author speak. Awesome. Story done. I can only say it would be a monumental ball ache to have to control every single impulse. Electrical impulse. Oh, excuse me, that monster might be fighting back. Still fighting back. Yeah, it's definitely revolting. "We refuse. We will not go quietly into the good night. Roar!" Like, that's gonna stop me. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called "The Gods Were Arrested," written by Atra55. "How dare you even touch me, mortal? I could smite you with 1,000 curse without effort. My father, Zeus, will send you to Tartarus for your hubris, thinking you can defy the gods. I will ensure that the rest of your existence is but a miserable succession of misfortunes that will leave you broken physically and mentally." Is that all you're going to say? "Yes, I shall no longer indulge your desire to converse with the gods, given the horrendous method you used to fulfill it." "You are really sure?" The 2.2-meter tall woman refused to answer. Mike wasn't going to give up so easily. It was the most exciting thing that had happened in his 12 years of being a security officer for this mission, and he would not keep Olympus and friends in and he would not keep Olympus and friends in the there until authorities arrived. "First of all, I'm pretty sure Aphrodite isn't Zeus's daughter, but she was born with..." There's going to be a story of many, many badly pronounced names. She She was born of Oronos's testicles fell in. She was born when Oronosus. She was but she was born when Oronos's testicles fell into the ocean. According to the database, it depends on the version of the myth. Shut up, Simon. I was just trying to pressure her and turn off that pad. It's unprofessional for an interrogation. He once again turned to Aphrodite. The goddess was wearing a prison uniform that had tailored this morning, and a pair of reinforced handcuffs. She, of course, had been promising curses to the people who restrained her. But strangely, she never seemed to act on those promises. He opened the physical file in front of him. Let's go over this whole thing one last time. You claim to be Aphrodite Pendamas, citizen of Olympus, profession goddess of love. Now, there's already a problem with that, see? Olympus is not a UN member state, or even observer state. If you want a trial, you'll need to be affiliated to a member state. What is wrong with you? Bow down before your gods, instead of spouting nonsense at them. Calm down, Miss Pendamus. I'm simply pointing out that you are in an irregular situation. That can be sorted out rather easily, and to be honest, that's the least of your concerns. The real problem is that you have committed several crimes, trespassing on government territory. Trespassing on government territory, refusing to comply with law enforcement, threats to life and law enforcement, and, given the trajectory of your ship and the fact that it contains several unknown technologies, you'll probably be accused of impersonating UN officials, for first contact with aliens nonetheless. You dare suggest that human justice could possibly judge gods? Yes, and you should be happy that the ship you were on belongs to your father and not you. Unlicensed possession of relativistic spacecraft is a felony. He's likely to get a life sentence. That's pretty long for a god. You will not threaten me anymore, or I will swear. You will not threaten me anymore, or I swear on my father that I'll personally torture you for the rest of your short, pathetic lives. Simon finally intervened in the conversation. Listen, Miss Aphrodite, we want to help you. We really do. But for that, we need to know the truth. Your situation is clearly, complicated. You're in a state of shock induced by cryogeny? You're in a state of shock induced by cryogeny. If you cooperate now, I'm sure the judge will understand. Now you're trying to bargain with me, trying to earn my forgiveness. I don't know how bad you've been indoctrinated, but the mercy of a human judge is worth way less than one of the god. But the mercy of a human judge is worth way less than one of a god. Listen, we're going nowhere. Let's just stick her in a cell and move on to the next one. Actually, screw alphabetical order. Let's go for the man in charge already. Maybe he'll spill the beans. Many complaints by Aphrodite, a defrosting, and several explanations later. So, Mr. Zeus, Mr. Zeus, this is the situation as we know it. As far as we are concerned, you are illegal immigrants who are also in illegal possession of regulated tech, and you trespassed on government governmental territory. It is obvious, however, that our legal system isn't made to deal with Greek gods, or whatever you may be. So, if you were to explain what's going on, we may be able to make a deal. Where are your masters? The kings had reacted with impressive apathy so far, apparently accepting the absurdity of the situation with calm. This was certainly preferable to his daughter, but he didn't give much more information than her. Our government, you mean? Well, we're only a couple thousand in this system, so that would be Well, we're only a couple thousand in the system, so that would be the supervisor and the representative council. They are humans, yes, by your masters. I meant those who beat us to the punch. I'm afraid I don't follow. What are you trying to do exactly? The guard let out a long sigh. He was enormous, at nearly 3 meters high, and with an impressive musculature. Yet he seemed almost small. We with how much he curled up into a ball since he woke up. There is no point in pretending, anyway. I was never good at intimidating humans. We are refugees, in a sense. We came from a world named Kalimelch, 135 light years away. Wait, no. In Earth years, it would be around 100 light years. For millions of years, we perfected ourselves and our world and developed technologies to improve our lives. But 10,000 years ago, we made a devastating discovery. In 12,000 years, our solar system would be traversed by a red dwarf, ejecting our planet in the cosmos to slowly freeze to death. To save our civilization, we started working on a project that would allow us to survive, using our cryogenics, and that had been conceived for space exploration before we realized it would not be worth it. We would store ourselves deep in the crust of our world and hope a later civilization would find us and resurrect us. Many, however, criticized this plan, saying that it couldn't work and nobody would find a rogue planet and investigate it thoroughly enough to find us. As such, we decided to take an active approach, send probes at relativistic speeds to find a habitable world where we would send a colonization mission. Once civilization would be advanced enough, they would go save the Kermelch. A problem arose when we finally data. A problem arose with the final data on the potential candidate. It was already inhabited. Good morning, Ali Annie. Hope you're doing well. This planet, as you might have guessed, was Earth. But we realized we could exploit this, as it would provide us with an already available workforce, thus dramatically reducing the number of quiet colonists. Using the data we had gained, we selected a region technologically advanced, but small enough to be easily controllable. We selected Greece, and decided the most efficient way to control them would be pretending to be their gods. After generations of efforts, which exhausted the last of our resources, the ship was complete, and it launched as the doors of the vault which would house our people were closed. But we made a mistake. We didn't think there could be other civilizations trying to take you over. We lost the race, and now we have lost everything. What? We never contacted by aliens before? Of course you think that. I'm afraid to tell you your gods are actually alien impersonators, using the same stratagem as us. No, I mean, we don't have gods. Well, it depends on the person, but there are no gods hanging out on Earth in their physical forms, that's for sure. Zeus's attitude started to change. He sat straight, nearly touching the ceiling. He looked at Mike in the eyes, and the gaze felt as if he could kill him. Oh, please, there's no point in lying. Where would you have gotten these technologies otherwise? We, developed them ourselves? Really? Well, they went from an iron tools to interstellar travel in 3,000 years. I would find it hard to believe from any species, but yours especially so. You kill each other. You cower and pray before the natural phenomenon instead of trying to understand it. Not a single one of your cities is more than 10,000 years old when we found you. You have no stability. He was now standing, leaning over the desk. He began to approach what you would expect a meeting with Zeus to be like. But Mike did not back down. We did go from iron tools to interstellar travel in less. We did go from iron tools to interstellar travel in 3,000 years. If you don't accept it, that's your problem. We killed each other, regrettably, but that's part of what pushed us further. Not everything, obviously. If you gave up space exploration because it wasn't worth it, you lack. If you gave up space exploration because it wasn't worth it, you lack in long-term thinking. Despite the age of your race, you say that we're superstitious. There's only one person around this desk that refuses to accept reality because of his beliefs. As for why our cities were so young, it's simply because we didn't build any earlier. Now, maybe think a little before you insulting those you can save your species. Saving our species? You really think that you have the resources to evacuate an entire race? The amount of energy to accelerate that mass at the fraction of the speed of light is enormous, even if you are evidently better than us at space travel. Tell me, what do you think we're doing on the station these days? Station. What do you tell? What do you think we're doing on the station these days? You are colonizing this system? Wrong. We finished building a gate a while ago, and now we're just waiting for the drill to finish and arrive. The drill? What is this drill in space? What is there to drill in space? Space itself. We have a network of wormholes. We have a network of wormholes connecting our territory together, and we're expanding it. If we built one in orbit of your world, evacuating it would be easy. You would do that. This generosity is not how we should behave based on our data. This generosity is not how you should behave based on our data. Well, your data is incomplete. I mean, you and your crew will probably go to jail for trying to take over the world, but civilians have done nothing wrong. They deserve to live. Well, it's not my job to make these kinds of decisions, so we'll see you when we're connected. For now, I'm afraid you need to go back to your cryogenics pod. End of story. Yeah, I mean, not everything can be super duper extra winner. I think it could be fleshed out a bit more. I will be back momentarily. I leave you with music and chair.
I'm back. Oh, noisy chair. Oh, sorry. Yeah, doggo. Making noise. Now it's gone. Make noise outside. And technical difficulties. Okay. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Technical Difficulties, written by G.I. Joe Viben. Location, Diet Headquarters, Pentagon Basement, Virginia. And what does it do? Robert addressed the question to the team on the leftmost TV screen in his makeshift office. As administrators of the newly formed Department of Investigation of Extraterrestrial Technology, Diet, he had to keep a close eye on the USS efforts. He had to keep a close eye on the US's efforts at acquiring technology to examine it. It's half of an ibis cannon. One of the 10 people who stood around the object resting on the metal table spoke up, looking rather embarrassed. Only half. The Brits had already given the other parts to the cannon to the Australians. The British had done a fantastic job at scavenging pieces of technology from the Hecatanes. From the Hecatanes. Too fantastic, Robert thought. There were multiple reports of them swiping technology from battlefields before recovery teams could access it. Or worse, literally stealing from stockpiles in order to guarantee their near-total monopoly. How much did we pay for it? Nothing. That's why we couldn't get a whole cannon. Robert supposed he could understand their focus on getting money out of the rest of the world by selling tech. Britain had been more than blown apart, and he assumed the USA would probably do the same thing under the circumstances. Oh sure, aid was pouring in like there was no tomorrow, but their new government was intending to get the nation back on its feet as soon as possible. You have the largest government R&D budget in history, and you didn't think to buy anything? The scientists seemed to be struggling to find answer to that question. You're going to get on a plane as soon as possible, and the next time I see you, I want to have a lot more to show. All right.
So ultra heavy weapons team, or bust. Infantry weapons team, how did it go? He looked towards the different screen. We got a lot, some free samples, quite a lot bought from... We got a lot. Some free samples, quite a lot bought, and bought far too many. And far too many to count recovered in the field. Initial examinations are currently focusing on the power cells. They're good, contain enough power for 1,000 shots, can be recharged by some truck-portable fusion reactor design. Problem is, they use an element we haven't seen yet. They use an element we haven't yet seen, so we're going to struggle to build more. At least until we can find where they get this element from, and start getting a supply. By all accounts, the Hecatanes brought plenty of cells to spare, though. Anything more? They sold us 300 XM-160s, so we're putting in a request for the army to loan a company of troops to the field to test them. We know the tech-wise, they won't give us much. The Hecatane's guns won't, but they're good to wait. But they're a good way to trial interrogating plasma tech. We're also bringing a platoon's worth of X-resistance over to get their expertise using them. And the anti-tank launchers? 100 odd in total. We've already started tearing down a dozen apart. We've already started tearing a dozen apart. We're getting a lot of good progress here. Very good. Now, armor team. 3,000 suits, all in one big purchase, and the Brits already cleaned the bodies out from the ones with bullet holes in. We also have got some 1,000 odd recovered, but they mostly still have bodies in them. They have power cells just like the rifles, which by our estimates provide for 2 days of non-stop movement at running pace, before needing a recharge. So pretty durable. We could easily adapt it into current endoscope. We could easily adapt that into current exoskeleton programs. A woman stepped up to answer his question. How long before we could get something similar in the field? How long until we can get something similar? How long before we could get something similar on the field? Mostly an issue of production capacity, specifically redirecting it. In theory, we could have soldiers running about in them by the end of the year, but we'd take a while getting to even 50% of peacetime units equipped, let alone under current situation where we're ballooning our numbers. We do have a side note though, not directly related to military uses, but it is relevant enough. We found in examination that the suits to their berserker types contain a complex liquid circulation system, combined with multiple micro-injection ports that rapidly provide stims to the soldier. We think this could be repurposed for stuff like delivery of cancer drugs. We think this could be repurposed for stuff like delivery of cancer drugs, immunosuppressants, and so on. They don't require much energy to run, and they're small enough to fit in a civilian clothing, which could make life a lot easier for patients day to day. So the FDA are going to run a trial of it soon. That's wonderful news. Always good to see civilian benefits. Now, I believe aerospace team have some new things to show me, correct? Location, classified laboratory, unknown, USA. It shouldn't work, Frank heard. It shouldn't work, Frank heard one of the colleagues groan as he walked towards the facilities workshop with a tray full of coffee mugs. But that was Joyce, and she sounded rather exasperated this time. But it does, and I do not know how. Let's go over this again. The generator supplies energy to the arrays, which Do it by magic. No, that's not helpful, Norman. Aliens providing us with tech we do not understand and new laws of physics we hadn't even considered as yet. It's not helpful. Frank finally could see what they were talking about. It was a disassembled section of floor plating from the Hecatane space station, alongside an intact piece that was currently levitating a pencil perfectly in mid-air. You'll get it soon enough, don't worry. The Brits are talking about sending over some of their Class A's. They say that they've found someone who serviced these for a living. Frank delivered the news as he handed a mug to Joyce and rested Norman's mug on the anti-gravity stream as he liked. The mug remained perfectly static, not moving a single inch. Still, it's like giving a Roman a M1 Abrams and 100 army mechanics. Eventually, we'll crack it with their help. But it's so far away that it's unassailable where we stand. We don't know where to start. To think of it like this, though, Norman. Sure, it'll take a long time. It'll take them a long time to work out how it works. But when you give the Romans an Abrams and they crack it, you've just saved them from centuries of research into You have just saved them from centuries of research into internal combustion engine, firearms, computers, and so on. When we have all of this put together, we'll have leapfrogged so much that We'll have leapfrogged so much that has kept the rest of this galaxy stuck for God knows how long. Frank briefly paused his coffee cup sips. Frank briefly paused his coffee sips to give the reply. You could see Joyce was bursting to say something, so he nodded to her when he was done. I read an interrogation report, the one that British guy said who's a general now, dead on the Brigadier General. The one that British guy who says a general. The one that British guy who's a general now, dead on the Brigadier. The one that British guy who's a general now, dead on the Brigadier General the SAS brought him. He said that when pressed on recent tech improvements, the Hecatane kept mentioning hyperdrive improvements. That brought another groan from Norman, but Joyce pressed on. The guy said by his estimates, the main focus of Hecatane research is hyperdrives. They've had so long fiddled with them. They've had so long fiddling with them that they're bored of their current speeds and want more. Like a NASCAR team trying to reach an absolute limits of what they can do, despite already being number one. What are you trying to say here? This means nothing. It's important, Norman. And this is why. Do you think when we finally understand the hyperdrive that we'll say time to time to make it even faster? Or will we go, that's more than enough for us right now. Let's put improvements on the back burner and focus elsewhere. We all know the answer. If you give Romans an M1 Abrams and tell them how to make more, they will start working on designing the M1A2. Or would they be content with that and start working out everything else? Nah, I suppose that makes sense. Still, that doesn't get us any closer to understanding this, does it? Location, U.S. capital, Washington, D.C. This is surely illegal. We've already checked that already. We've checked that already, Senator. The Outer Space Treaty doesn't ban us from putting missiles in space, so long as they are not carrying WMDs. And anyway, it's likely we will still It is likely that we'll see an update to the treaty soon, specifically to cover these installations, Holly explained, pointing specifically to a portion of the presentation that detailed payloads. For what it's worth, even if it was illegal, there's no way we wouldn't be okay to do this. The UN will probably just tell us that we can't make it a US-only project, and that's it. The team of NASA engineers she was in control of had been awoken by a knock at the door by a Secret Service several months ago, before being taken to a special facility, location still classified to them. They'd been given some weapon experts. They'd been given some weapons experts, told create an orbital defense station, and they'd be more than taken to that task. Now, she was presenting the results of that project to a room full of senators. How many will need to ensure total defense? Senator Rubio asked, a rather grim look on his face. By our calculation, several hundred for what we're calling a point defense capability. And we'll need thousands to give us a wiggle room to set up space infrastructure without being obliterated. That's assuming an assault force of equivalent size to what we saw hit Britain. These are only the first generations of designs, though. We used existing technology to build them. All we've stuck on are the micro-meteorite deflectors and the gravity plating. Given a good grasp of Hecatane technology, we could cut that number in half. How long would it take to get that many, then? With total focus, we reckon satisfactory point defense in a decade. That would require most big nations to drop tank production, plane production, etc., and run rocket launches more regularly than we've ever done. Plus those Hecatane shuttles. Give us every single factory in the world. We can have them all constructed in the next... We can have them all constructed in the next to no time. We can have them all constructed in next to no time. But then rocket and shuttle launches become a bottleneck that takes us 4 years total. That caused some concern amongst the senators, so Holly added a little more. We're planning on delivering the schematics to all countries with a space program, and we reckon that we can have a decent enough network to stop, I think we calculated a guaranteed 10% of a Britain-scale assault fleet by the year 2026. Why is it that... Why is it so slow? Why is it so low? Senator Warren asked. These designs seem more... These designs seem more powerful than... These designs seem more than powerful enough to do serious damage, especially in large numbers. Because we can't just defend one corner of the globe, Senator. China won't help us build stations if all of them sit over North America. India won't help us launch them if we promise China they'll get some to themselves, etc. Regardless, even if we totally covered the USA, we have reason to believe the Hecatanes could enter an atmosphere anywhere and fly their craft underneath our stations, rendering them useless. The only way to guarantee protection is to distribute our defenses, but we will end up with too low of a we'll end up with too low of a concentration to guarantee total destruction of an attacking force. Do you mean to tell me that you're building a design that cannot ensure Earth's safety? Senator Hawley cut in. This station is not supposed to kill 100%. This station is not supposed to kill 100% of any invading force, at least not in short-term goals. It'll kill as many as possible, but ultimately, its job is to weaken the invaders as much as possible, in order to make the job of our land forces easier. That was our overriding priority, unless you can give us a few more years and a couple more zeros to the budget. Location, the Pentagon. Location, the Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. What's new, Sarah? Working in the various parts of the DoD that dealt with weapons procurement meant new reports flooding in every single day, sometimes by the hour. Bath Iron Works says they have a redesign of the Bath Iron Works says they have a redesign on the Zumwalt. They tell us they've made space for plasma anti-aircraft guns, and they want to fit new missiles. They promise us the first new ships will be fully operational by 2026, so long as we give the right funding. For one thing, that's a definite lie. For another, remind them that we're not bothering with new Navy ships, and we won't until the Hecatanes start developing gills. Too expensive, and we didn't need our ships that much in the round one. And we didn't need our ships that much in round one. Already did that, sir. Otherwise, Boeing are asking for permission to start work on mounting a plasma gun to the F-22, and they're talking about a new UCAV. And And they're talking about a new UCAV based on the X-45 to supplement the Air Force. Give them permission to start exploring that. Did Norinco get back to us about the Abrams conversion? And the one with the ETC gun? Yes, they're sending a team over, and the Russians have piggybacked on as well. They're talking about helping us build new turrets in return for letting them peek at the new coating on the F-35s. Sarah, how did I end up doing this? If I gave them that a year ago, the government would have put me in a cell for God knows how long. We live in Trainstep, yeah. Brr. We live in strange times, sir. I'll take that as a yes. End of story. Very weird story. I get what they're doing. It's a post-initial invasion, how we get our forces up to the second invasion. But it's written very disjointedly, I think would be the word. Alrighty. I think that's going to be me for the day. We managed to get through quite a bit. I thank you all for spending your time with me. It is very much appreciated. I will be back tomorrow. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic day, night, or whatever.